The main character of this novel was named Bianca Crawford, and she was very beautiful and cruel. She loved the best male character in history, named Ricardo Vinkaiser, and so she forced him to be with her. The woman kept whispering passionately that she could save him from another lady, driving the man crazy. And the villain Bianca was incredibly happy when this hero of the novel did not resist her insidious lies. But in reality, Ricardo never even thought of giving his heart to this vile girl. Crawford forgot that she was a villain, so she had to die at the hands of her husband. And at that moment, Vinkaiser's face burned with hatred for the terrible and disgusting girl. When the lady read all this in the book, she experienced a real shock, because she could not believe it. She was so angry at her bitter fate that she threw the maid out to think about her plan of action. The girl was ready to shout at everyone, because she was scared because of what she had just read. Bianca had always believed that she would always be with Ricardo, and she didn't want to die so stupidly. A few days ago, she accidentally bought this book, wanting to read something about love. However, as she read, Crawford increasingly recognized herself and her strong and handsome husband in her. And in the book, for some reason, the Marquis's daughter was described as the most insidious and fatal villain of the novel. Therefore, Miss became afraid that she was not the heroine of her life and could soon die. During morning tea parties, Ricardo was always calm and quiet, as he hardly communicated with his wife. The man did not show emotions, as he was used to hiding them in battles, since he had become a talented swordsman in his youth. But Bianca got married to him because she couldn't take her eyes off the guy's figure and wealth. And the girl would also like to have such a seductively embarrassing voice as the man's. The only thing that bothered the young lady was that Ricardo was the main character in that book, and she was the villain. Although Bianca believed that due to her good pedigree, she was not inferior to her husband in power and wealth. She was born so beautiful that she could easily have everything she wanted, just by blinking her eyes. And that's why the girl already hated the heroine from the book very much, although they had never communicated. The lady's name was Mary, and she came from the country, so she just stupidly forgot what she had to do. Since Ricardo showed neither love nor hate, Bianca decided to bind him to herself more closely. She was afraid that the hero would go to the lady with whom he was happy in the book and leave her with nothing. Bianca was angry because she had never seen her husband smile like he showed Mary. Moreover, in the book, Vinkaiser showed very passionate emotions towards his red-haired lover. And from these scenes while reading, the villainess's eyes even popped out of her forehead and her ears turned red. But the wife had no intention of telling her husband about the book because she didn't want to push him away. Just in case, the lady asked whether her fiancé could kill another person in ordinary life. But Ricardo had no doubt that he would use his powers only in war. But the heroine remembered that the book told her about a different plot, in which she suffered because she was left alone. However, Bianca did not say anything because she was afraid of ruining her relationship with Vinkaiser. The miss was scared when the guy said that he could kill someone who harmed his loved one. She still didn't know if she was the same villain from the book who poisoned the red-haired Mary. The miss had so many questions, but she did not stop the groom from leaving. The girl did not believe that the Duke would ever treat her well, so she went to the bookstore to find out more information about the book she recently bought. However, the seller confidently stated that he was seeing this edition for the first time in his life and could not help. Bianca was puzzled by what was happening because there was clearly something wrong with the book. The man said that he had never even heard of such a title because all the books are similar to each other. He gave several examples of the same genre, which really were not very different. The girl brazenly stated that she could not have bought the book anywhere else because she remembered her actions. Bianca took advantage of her status and said that she was ready to kill the merchant if she did not learn the truth. The man fearfully reminded her about the markings on his products, which were not on the lady's book. Then Crawford unexpectedly suggested using a seal instead of the current labels. The merchant was delighted with such sound advice from the miss who had just been angry, and the heroine herself headed home, because she realized that she would not find anything in this place. For the past few days, Bianca couldn't tear herself away from the book, which frightened her with its plot. She was so deep in thought that she forgot about the ball for which the maid had come to prepare her. Miss could only hope that Sir Wensbury would not cheat on his beloved wife. Bianca even believed that she was beautiful enough to keep Ricardo from leaving her for Mary. However, the fear that the book would turn out to be right still did not allow the lady to live in peace. She tried to distract herself with the people around her so as not to think about what fate awaited her in the future. Then Bianca realized that the maid had brought her white shoes and spoke to her menacingly. Crawford recalled that she was wearing a red dress, which would not go with anything white. The poor assistant was unable to say anything in her own defense because of the horror that gripped her. But Bianca was actually curious about why the maid had made that particular choice. Miss wanted to know the reason why her assistant offered her white shoes. So she didn't think that the head maid would promise to reprimand Panya. Bianca realized for the first time that all the servants were very afraid of her, which hinted at similarities with the villain. All her life, the girl did not pay attention to the people around her, who obediently helped her in everything. Soon the heroine was already sitting at the table with Sir Wensbury, who was talking about his exploits. Only the lady herself considered such an occupation boring, but had no right to admit it. For the sake of her status, Crawford even lied that she always found the Marquise's stories interesting. The man laughed loudly because he was pleased to receive praise from such a good miss. Surprisingly, the Sir quickly came to his senses and admitted that he was too old for new adventures. But he named Ricardo, who modestly said that he was only doing his job as the new hero. This turn of the conversation only made Bianca want to run away from this table even more. But then she heard Wensbury ask when the young couple would get married. The girl sadly noted that Vinkaiser did not name a specific date for their marriage. The heroine waited for many years for Ricardo to finally decide to make her his legal wife. But until now, the guy had only said that he was going to keep the promise between their families. And Miss didn't know whether he had feelings for her or was just doing his duty. In the end, Crawford couldn't stand it any longer, and on the way back, she decided to talk to her fiancé about the wedding. Bianca immediately noticed that Ricardo again looked like he didn't care, but the lady stated outright that it was time for them to start preparing for such an important event. She waited for an answer from the guy, but he still continued to behave quietly and very mysteriously. The heroine could not help but understand that the knight was cold towards her, despite the fact that they were engaged. With horror, Miss remembered that she had also raised this issue in the book, because she had not lived to see the wedding. But Ricardo did not pay attention to the fact that he was greatly offending the girl with his slowness. Bianca was angry that she had been with a man who was not interested in her all this time. More than anything in the world, the girl was afraid that the events from the book with the broken engagement would be repeated. So the heroine hastened to change the subject so that Ricardo would not start to hate her because of her persistence. She started talking about the dog that the boy had raised with great pleasure as a child. The heroine remembered that in the book, Vinkaiser fell in love with Mary because she reminded him of a loyal dog. Miss spoke to the knight about this topic to check if his reaction would be like in the book. And Crawford got very angry because Ricardo repeated all the words from the work exactly the same. Bianca had no intention of being a villain, so she began to tear up the unfortunate work. When that didn't work, the lady threw the book into the fire just so she could never see it again. But the girl was unable to harm the work, no matter how hard she tried. But the heroine was not going to die, so she decided to find salvation for herself from the plot. So Miss did not sleep until the morning, as she reread the contents of the book over and over again. She only put it down when the maids came to help their mistress get ready. The heroine noticed that she was different from the person described in the book. Miss never tried to be angry and rude to everyone around her in order to defend her opinion. But from today on, the lady decided to become much kinder so that everyone would consider her good. Therefore, for the first time, she did not give any instructions to the servants so that they could collect it themselves. And all this time, the lady was thinking about how she could be a villain at all if she behaved well. The girl frowned and became angry because she could not find answers to her questions about the plot. Here, Panya asked the lady about the shoes, which distracted the lady from her heavy thoughts. The maid waited humbly for Bianca to choose what she wanted to wear on her feet today. But the girl got scared when Crawford suddenly remembered the white shoes. The assistant immediately began to apologize, which the heroine did not actually demand from her. Bianca didn't expect that Panya would be so afraid of being fired because of her poor family. And the maid herself even burst into tears while begging her mistress not to punish her. The lady then said that she would wear white shoes today and would also reward the girl for her help. The heroine herself went to meet the butler because she needed to find out something. Bianca immediately asked the man to find any information about Mary Villona. The assistant was surprised that the lady asked to know about the commoner, but said nothing. Crawford was not about to back down, because she was curious whether the people in the book were real. So the miss dictated to the servant all the questions that he had to clarify soon. But most of all, the girl was interested to know whether there was any connection between Mary and the Marquise. The miss was pleased when she saw that the butler only nodded obediently in response to her. Then she asked him to tell her what the aristocrats and assistants thought of her. The man immediately said that Bianca's reputation was impeccable, and everyone wanted to be friends with her. But even without him, Miss knew that she was one of the best representatives of the aristocracy. So Crawford explained that she wanted to find out what people really thought of her character. The heroine felt that the butler had lied to her about everyone around her loving her very much. But the miss did not ask any more questions and let the assistant go about his business. Although Crawford could not understand why the servant was afraid to tell her the truth about the opinions of others, the girl was afraid that she might turn into a villain and die, like in the story from the book. She closed her eyes, intending to rest a little and think about her sad future. Suddenly, the heroine noticed that the book on the table suddenly began to glow brightly for no reason. The girl jumped away from her out of fear, but was embarrassed because nothing happened. It was the first time Bianca had seen anything like this, so she was extremely wary of the book. She cautiously opened the pages of the book and began to try to find the reason for such a glow. Here, Miss discovered that the story had changed a little and did not end with Ricardo and Mary. For some reason, the plot continued and started talking about the grave of the villainess, which everyone avoided. Suddenly, one maid came to bow to the grave because she remembered the kindness of her mistress. Crawford immediately guessed that the assistant from the book was Panya, whom she helped today. Previously, the heroine believed that she should not even look in the direction of the maids who serve her. But the lady realized that she should not simply pay such dedicated people for their work. Bianca felt a surge of strength and hope that she could change her future in this world. So the lady jumped up from her seat and asked Panya to quickly prepare a carriage for her. Miss was eager to continue doing things that no one expected of her. The girl smiled happily at the maid because she believed that she could change everything around her. For this reason, she came to the orphanage because she decided to help improve their lives. Even the maid was surprised by her mistress's behavior, although Crawford remained serious. The heroine herself did not understand why she had previously avoided such places, because they were not scary. Here, Bianca was called out by a little girl who was looking at the visiting lady with apprehension. Panya turned to the little girls and said that her mistress wanted to talk to the director of the shelter. The heroine did not know how she should behave in a place where she was for the first time. Then the girl noticed that the smallest girl remained next to her and looked at her face. Since the baby was harmless in appearance, Miss did not move away from her. Suddenly, the girl asked if the princess herself had suddenly come to visit her. Bianca looked at the child silently, as she did not know how to communicate with small children. And the girl suddenly became sad because such a beautiful lady was not a princess. Crawford then said that she almost matched the status of this loud word. She didn't expect that the child would happily grab her after these words and drag her along. Crawford could not say a word against the girl, although she was very dirty and unpleasant. But for some reason, the heroine felt that deep inside she enjoyed such touches, so Miss was not immediately ready to talk to the director of the shelter, who was nervous. But soon Bianca calmly announced that she had come to support this place. The woman was completely confused, because she had never heard of Crawford doing this, but the lady made the contribution so that Madame could spread good rumors about her. The director was surprised by such a request, because no one had ever approached her with such a question before. The heroine even began to get angry because the woman could not understand what was required of her. In fact, the girl wanted to show everyone that she was a good person, not an evil one. In the end, Leanna agreed to fulfill all the lady's conditions because she needed money. She was thrilled that Crawford wrote such a large check for the children. But the lady herself said that this money meant little to her, so she did not think about it. Leanna happily promised that she would definitely tell everyone how good Miss Crawford was. But the director did not expect that immediately after her words, the beautiful girl would somehow stop. The only thing was that right in front of her, the heroine saw her fiancé Ricardo. The guy also clearly didn't expect to meet a lady in this place, so he frowned in response. Bianca stood frozen in shock, not expecting to see a knight at such a time. And the guy asked suspiciously what the girl was doing here, since she should have stayed in the palace. Crawford felt hurt because Ricardo was clearly angry with her and she had done nothing wrong. The girl turned away from her fiancé because she guessed that he thought something wrong about her at that moment. Suddenly, little Lala jumped out in front of the lady and selflessly began to defend her. The little girl said that she would fight for the princess, even if she had to fight against Ricardo. Miss laughed at the expression of confusion on Van Kaiser's face, who had not expected this. Eventually, the bride and groom were able to talk peacefully, and the guy admitted that he thought about surveillance. Bianca didn't like that the guy asked her for forgiveness so easily, because he had a high status. At this point, Winkheiser became interested in why his fiancé had decided to sponsor an orphanage, and Bianca haughtily declared that she had taken a personal interest in the matter because she was still angry. The Duke admitted that he often visits the children, but no one knows that he is an aristocrat. The heroine was surprised when she heard that the guy was teaching boys fencing for the sake of their future. All of Winkheiser's students could learn a lot from him, so this was a good chance. But the lady did not hear the knight helping the girls, so she asked him to tell her. But the guy admitted that he couldn't think of any prospects for the little girls in the shelter. The heroine had not previously been interested in the lives of common people, so she knew nothing about them. So it came as a shock to her that Lala could lose her health in the future through part-time work. The girl could not believe that someone could really treat children so cruelly. But then Ricardo reminded that it was not easy for the boys either, because they could have been sent to war. And there was never anything good in this place, no matter how skilled a knight you were. The guy sadly admitted that he still has nightmares about what happened during the war. Bianca shuddered in fear at the sight of the knight's empty eyes, lost in memories. The lady could not even imagine that all this time her reserved fiancé had been suffering alone. To support Ricardo, she took his hand, although the knight did not ask for it at all. The lady did not know what to say, but Winkheiser suddenly grabbed her hand, which embarrassed the lady. For the first time in her life, she saw a guy smile back at her so sincerely and joyfully. This made the lady wonder whether she really knew this man. The girl was embarrassed, because before she had only seen such a smile from a guy in a book about her future. But right now, the Duke's actions worried Bianca, who tried not to show it. Crawford tried her best to hide her heartbeat, not wanting to show her emotions. Suddenly, Ricardo approached the girl and asked if everything was okay with her. This only made the heroine blush even more, but she tried to say that she was simply tired. Crawford couldn't help but think that this was the first time Winkheiser had ever looked directly at her. The girl quickly headed towards the exit, as she could not calm down due to embarrassment. The heroine had dreamed of such a look from her fiancé all her life, so she was happy. But Miss didn't know for sure whether this event was a good or a bad sign for her. The next morning, the lady was in a bad mood because of the information she had received from the butler. What alarmed her was that Mary Valona really existed in this world and lived in the village. As described in the book, this girl helped her sick mother and worked a lot. It also happened that the Marquis had once stayed in this village because he had been injured during the war. The heroine didn't want to die at all because it was written in some stupid book. The lady decided to distract herself from her heavy thoughts and went to visit the bookshop owner. The man was glad to meet the lady as he wanted to show off the changed seal on the books. But this did not impress Bianca much because she had business with this man. She thoughtfully asked him to find any books he could find on war trauma and panic disorder. Crawford didn't intend to wait long, so she angrily ordered that the books be picked up for her immediately. While the merchant was looking for the necessary literature, the miss looked at the shelves with interest. She came across some children's fairy tales and immediately remembered Lala, who loved princesses. Since she liked the girl, Bianca decided to reward her for such behavior. Therefore, Miss confidently declared that she would also buy all the fairy tales that were in this store. But the heroine didn't expect to meet Ricardo again at the orphanage. Bianca didn't really want to talk to him right now, but there was no other way out. So she admitted that she brought some books for the children to make them happy. Miss was embarrassed by the fact that Winkheiser showed a lot of attention to her, something she was not used to. So the joyful arrival of the children saved the girl from the excitement that was growing more and more. The heroine managed to sincerely become imbued with Lala, despite the fact that she had not previously interacted with children. Everyone liked the little girl for her cheerfulness and spontaneity, so Bianca couldn't help but smile back at her, no matter how much she worried about the future. The lady was pleased to hear compliments from the little girl, who called her very beautiful. But then Crawford heard a chuckle from Ricardo, so she looked at him suspiciously. The heroine got angry because the guy was watching her from the side and smirking. And Lala noticed this, so she promised the lady that she would protect her from this swordsman. Bianca watched with a smile as the girl cheerfully tried to prove that she was formidable. The little girl made scary expressions, but they turned out very cute. Crawford couldn't help but upset Lala by saying that her antics only made her more attractive. Suddenly, Winkheiser saved the lady from having to say anything as he caught the girl. The guy asked the little girl not to cause problems for Bianca, although the miss was happy to talk. Therefore, the girl watched with surprise at the knight who tried to protect her unnecessarily. For the first time in her life, the heroine felt that she liked everything that was happening outside the estate. Although before the lady had not even thought about what exactly made her smile. She accepted the knight's help and silently rose to her feet, captivated by his beauty. The awkwardness was broken by Lala, who declared that Bianca and Ricardo were like a princess and prince. The girl hopefully asked the boy and girl to get married, because they were so beautiful. But the heroine remembered that the book still promised her death, so she was not happy about the wedding. But Bianca didn't want to upset little Bianca, so she didn't say anything. But Ricardo made the girl happy by saying that he would definitely invite her to their wedding if there was one. After which he let go of Lala, who was already invited to play together by her good friend Nicole. And the heroine couldn't believe that her fiancé spoke positively about the wedding for the first time. All her life she had listened to him say that they should fulfill their duty, not their desires. So the lady found it suspicious that the guy started talking well about marrying her. Ricardo himself confirmed that he had not been so interested in their marriage before. Miss could not argue with the fact that the knight never said that he would ever break off the engagement. And at that moment, Vinkaiser echoed the lady's thoughts, saying that he had not rejected their wedding. The heroine was angry because of such words, because she felt deceived by such behavior. What offended the girl most was that the guy behaved as if this was normal. The lady was going to tell the knight everything she thought about his sudden change of mind. But then she heard Lala's sweet voice, joyfully and impatiently calling her. The little girl unceremoniously invaded the adult's personal space and asked to read to her. However, the lady was not ready to pay attention to the girl right now, as she said. But Miss didn't expect that the little girl would admit that she herself couldn't read. But Lala herself did not consider her ignorance to be something bad, because no one had ever taught her. She constantly asked people around her to read to her, so she never felt sad. And this time, the little girl agreed to wait until the adults were free after their conversation. Bianca listened in confusion to Ricardo, who said that the children could not read on their own. The heroine did not know that common people do not hire nannies for themselves because they do not have money for it. This made Miss think about how inattentive she had been all this time. Even Vinkaiser knew that commoners were taught only by their mothers, if they knew anything. And he was sad that orphans like Lala would never learn to read. Bianca immediately exclaimed that she would definitely help the girl with this difficult question. The girl realized that all this time, she had not paid attention to the fact that the baby spoke poorly. She said that she would talk about the wedding a little later, since reading was a more important issue. Ricardo was surprised when he realized that his fiancé was actually good with children. The lady admitted that she had not needed to communicate with the younger ones before, so she remained silent. Crawford pulled away in displeasure, as Vinkaiser moved emotionally toward her. It was important for the lady now to find a teacher for the children so that they could learn to read. Therefore, the miss did not continue communicating with the groom, who greatly embarrassed her. When Bianca wanted to return home in the evening, unexpected complications arose. Crawford was frustrated that the assistant could not get the horse to move. The man sheepishly told the others about this, as he did not know what he could do. Then Ricardo decided to help the girl and promised to take her to the estate himself. The servant happily thanked the knight for his responsiveness, as he was worried about his mistress. However, Crawford only became more angry because the servant did not even ask her opinion. The girl couldn't tell Vinkaiser directly that she didn't want his company, so she sighed. The heroine felt awkward around Ricardo, as he had been making her nervous lately. So the guy had to find a topic of conversation first, so he asked about books. Bianca grumbled rudely that she loved to read, so she had recently bought some new literature. At the same time, the lady hoped that the knight would not read the titles of the books that were about the war. Miss was worried that Vinkaiser might misunderstand her newly developed interest, but it turned out that Ricardo did not even think of connecting the purchase of books with his personality. So Crawford put herself in an awkward position, which is why she remained silent the entire way. She did not know that the Duke was becoming increasingly interested in her new behavior and sides. The guy liked to see a sincere smile on the face of a girl who had previously been cold. Previously, he imagined the lady only as a beautiful but ruthless and spoiled madam. The guy remembered that in the past, Bianca definitely hated children and showed it openly. While other people were admiring the baby, the lady didn't even look in her direction. And this circumstance disappointed Vinkaiser, who loved children very much. At that moment, he couldn't look at Bianca's cruel gaze, who was unhappy with the child. The guy himself believed that all children were prone to chaos and mischief, so he didn't see anything bad. All his life, the Duke secretly dreamed of living happily with his family, away from everyone else. However, due to his high status, the guy could not afford such quiet luxury. But after seeing the horror of war, his desire to live peacefully only grew stronger. And Ricardo believed that Bianca would never be able to give him what he really wanted. That is why the knight was surprised by the new sides of the girl that he discovered every day. Now Van Kaiser finally decided for himself that he wanted exactly such a wife. So the guy was going to do everything possible to make their wedding happen as soon as possible. The next morning, the heroine learned even more information about Mary from the butler. She felt sorry for this girl, who had endured a lot of gossip as a child. The lady was sad that Valona had to work so hard just for food. But the most terrible thing, Miss considered, was that the girl's mother became very ill as a result. The heroine could not understand why Mary continued to smile despite her difficult fate. Bianca thought with horror about why she decided to kill that poor girl in the book in the first place. The red-haired lady reminded her mistress of her maid, who also looked after the family, and her character seemed similar to Lala, who was always smiling. Crawford was worried that such a nice person would turn her into a villain, so the lady sighed heavily because she didn't know what she should do with the plot next. But life went on, so the heroine needed to be beautiful in society. She tried to talk nicely to the aristocrats in order to make a good impression. Bianca smiled with all her might, although she had many worries and fears in her soul. The lady clearly saw the other lady's deceitful glances, but she didn't say anything to them about it. One of the women even dared to talk about Crawford getting involved in charity work. But the young lady was not taken aback, as she expected that they would try to condemn her in this way. On the contrary, Miss was pleased that the director was telling everyone around her about her, so Bianca only smiled wider, despite the discussions of the aristocrats around her. Madame wanted to add a few more barbs, but then she noticed a nobleman. It turned out to be Van Kaiser, who quietly approached his beautiful bride from behind. The girl was embarrassed by the guy's presence, since the last time they parted awkwardly. But the woman, as luck would have it, left them alone, because she thought it would be better that way. Miss followed her with her gaze, and guessed that she had gone on to spread rumors about her. What surprised Crawford most was that even Ricardo admitted that he had heard news about her. The heroine confirmed all the knight's words, since it was beneficial for her if they talked about her. But the lady did not take into account that her fiancé was smarter than she thought about him all this time. So she didn't know what to answer when Van Kaiser asked why Bianca did good deeds. Miss ignored the anger in the knight's eyes, as she did not want to quarrel with him. So she smiled sweetly and said that she had always been a good person, actually. It was clear from the guy's face that he liked this answer, so his cheeks turned red. He apologized for his warnings and asked the girl for the long-awaited dance. Bianca looked at Van Kaiser in surprise, as she remembered that he didn't even like to dance. However, the lady did not refuse the groom, so as not to look suspicious in front of others. Beautiful music began to play around, signaling the beginning of dancing among the aristocrats at the ball. Hearing it, Crawford couldn't resist and whispered to the guy that her favorite melody was playing. She gave herself over completely to her emotions at that moment, because she wanted to enjoy the moment. However, quite quickly, thoughts of Mary again captured Mrs. Consciousness, no matter how much she did not want it. So the heroine did not immediately notice that Ricardo pressed her close to him during the dance. The girl quickly moved away from the knight, since they were not yet spouses. But Winchester demanded to know what Crawford was thinking while dancing with him. The heroine was not pleased to hear that her fiancé was demanding that she look only at him. Bianca still couldn't forget the insult that the guy hadn't paid attention to her before. So now, when Ricardo didn't leave her side for a second, the lady was only irritated by his presence. And Van Kaiser did not miss a single opportunity to get as close to the girl as possible. He even began to whisper pleasant compliments in her ear in order to win her over to his side. However, Bianca did not believe a single word of the knight, who was always cold towards her. And even the guy's sweet smile couldn't make Crawford believe in the sincerity of his feelings. The lady was not ready to continue this conversation now, so she decided to retire for a while. Despite the surprised looks around her, she ran away from the guy, not wanting to talk to him. Ricardo walked away with Miss in confusion, thinking about what he had done wrong for her. The heroine ran into another room, feeling how quickly her heart was beating from embarrassment. She had put on her makeup as usual, so she didn't understand what had attracted Van Kaiser to her today. So Crawford was left in doubt about what was going on between her and Ricardo. Bianca stubbornly thought that the guy was simply mistaken in his feelings for her. A couple of minutes later, the girl had to return to the hall so that the aristocrats would not lose her. And almost immediately, the lady ran into another acquaintance, whom she did not want to see now. It turned out to be a prince of the empire named Ozzel Blunt, famous for his beauty and manners. Bianca sighed as she greeted the boy she had been unable to escape from in time. The heir would like to communicate informally with the miss, who desperately resisted this. However, the prince, with a dazzling smile, asked the girl to call him by his name. But Crawford stubbornly observed all formalities when communicating with His Majesty. She had no intention of getting close to this man, although she had known him since childhood. Not wanting to linger on the conversation, the heroine said that she still had important things to do. However, Aesel puffed out his cheeks in an offended manner, which reminded him of a small child rather than an adult guy. Blunt managed to attract Bianca's attention and took advantage of this to ask her to dance. Crawford stood frozen in confusion, although she could not refuse the crown prince himself. Suddenly, the girl and the guy heard a familiar voice behind them that sounded displeased. Ricardo, who had been trying to find his bride in the crowd the whole time, approached the couple. Vinkieser did not miss how close the acquaintances' hands were to each other, but Ozzel joyfully greeted his old friend as if nothing had happened. But the knight himself could not keep a smile on his face because he was worried about such competition. He desperately tried to think of any way to keep Crawford from dancing with the prince. Blunt, meanwhile, called the lady to follow him again, taking advantage of the duke's confusion. And at that moment, Ricardo could not resist and hugged the girl, gently pressing her to himself. Bianca was surprised by this circumstance. As Vinkieser continued to amaze her, Aesel chuckled in response, but did not back down so quickly from his desire to dance. But Vinkieser remained adamant in his desire to have Crawford by his side. The heroine listened to her fiancé in confusion and understood less and less the reasons for his actions. The lady got angry when she noticed that the guys had completely forgotten about her presence due to the argument. Meanwhile, Aesel began to use his beauty charms, but they had no effect on the Duke. This made the grown-up guy stamp his foot cutely, making him look like a capricious child. He tried to indirectly obtain acceptance of the invitation to dance from Miss with a smile. But Ricardo was losing his composure with every passing second because of the prince's insolence. The guys were so carried away by their argument that they stopped paying attention to everything else. In the end, they both stared at the girl, waiting for her to decide which of them was right. Bianca stood there, confused, not wanting to take on such responsibility. However, at that moment, the voice of the butler was heard, who was looking everywhere for the escaped prince. Aesel had to admit his defeat, because he had no time left for the ball. The servant was determined to take his master with him, as he still had much to do in the palace. No matter how Blunt tried to escape his responsibilities, it was all ultimately useless. Bianca and Ricardo guessed that it was time to say goodbye, so they quickly bowed. Crawford was only glad that her assistant saved her from such an unpleasant situation. She would have liked to be alone a little longer, but first she needed to escape from Ricardo. But the guy shocked the lady by unexpectedly and tenderly calling her his bride. The heroine was sure that the knight had never spoken about her in such a way before. Therefore, the girl could not immediately think of what to say in response to her partner's caresses. She pulled away from him suspiciously, in case Ricardo wasn't real. Miss considered it outrageous that the knight should address her so unexpectedly with such a word. But Ricardo himself calmly said that he plans to continue calling the girl his fiancée. The heroine finally believed that the Duke had clearly eaten something bad in the orphanage. Just in case, the lady pretended not to notice the change in the guy's behavior. She only grumbled that Ricardo hadn't been so eager to dance before. In response, the guy stated that he could not allow the girl to dance with anyone else. The miss was embarrassed by the closeness between her partner and quickly turned away. Then Vinkieser, in confirmation of his words, pointed to the people who would like to dance with her. One of them was Renard Wensbury, whom Miss had known well since childhood. The second was a silent and calm bodyguard who tried to stay in the shadows. But most of all, Miss was frightened by the sight of the greedy gaze of the old man who was watching her. She was not pleased with such popularity, which could later bring only problems. That's why the lady clicked her tongue in displeasure when Ricardo mentioned this nuance with a grin. The guy never thought that the girl was really so interesting to everyone else. But Bianca became very angry when she realized that the knight did not perceive her attractiveness. The heroine sincerely considered herself to be almost the best aristocrat because of her beauty and status. She muttered angrily that she was perfect in everything, although the groom had not noticed this before. Vinkweiser was noticeably embarrassed by such bold statements from a lady who seemed more modest to him. The miss exclaimed angrily that only the Duke had always considered her an unworthy and stupid person. The knight didn't even notice that he had hurt the girl's feelings so much, because he hadn't noticed her all this time. And Bianca was so furious that she couldn't stop being sarcastic. Her whole body radiated irritation and anger, which she felt because of her possible future husband. Miss understood that her behavior now was far from ideal, but she could not stop. Suddenly, Ricardo looked with interest at the girl he had made so angry, and Crawford thought once again how grateful she was to the book for opening her eyes. The girl remembered who she was, and therefore was not going to tolerate disrespect towards herself. Miss could hardly restrain herself from telling Vinkweiser right now everything she thought about him. Suddenly, the Duke smiled tenderly at the girl, who he liked more and more every day. At the sight of this smile, the heroine's heart skipped a few beats, treacherously forcing her to freeze. The guy himself did not even understand what kind of influence he had on the young lady, who could not say a word. Miss was completely immersed in memories of her childhood, when Ricardo smiled so brightly every time they met. She was ready to give a lot, just to be in the estate of that time again, even for one day. After the event, the girl visited her old friend, who was the son of the Marquis of Wensbury. The heroine was sincerely glad to meet him, since she had not been able to have a heart-to-heart talk for a long time. Their conversation began with an exchange of pleasantries, as was usually the case among all aristocrats. The lady had a good impression of this red-haired guy and future heir. No one questioned his incredible resemblance to his father. It was just a joke played by his genes. But the elder Wensbury seemed to everyone to be a kind and stubborn warrior, hungry for adventure. His son, on the contrary, did not strive to perform feats, but only helped the people around him. And now Renard immediately asked for forgiveness for any misunderstandings he might have caused. But the guy's words only made the girl more suspicious of him. However, the heroine did not say anything bad to the Marquise's son, as she did not want to spoil her relationship with him. She felt awkward because the whole time she couldn't get the groom's sweet smile out of her head. But the lady had to concentrate on talking to the guy, who was clearly nervous. Reynard still hasn't said why he called Crawford to talk that evening. Bianca suspected that the knight might talk to her about the fact that he was still without a bride. The girl did not know for sure whether Wensbury's son was in love with the girl who broke off her engagement with him. Just in case, Miss tried not to jump to conclusions and to behave calmly. It was enough for her that her red-haired friend couldn't find a place for himself from incomprehensible excitement. Reynard admitted that he had been hesitant for a long time to decide to talk to anyone about his worries and concerns, but such behavior of her acquaintance irritated the heroine more and more with each passing second, as she valued her time. So the girl asked her friend with a smile to talk next time if he was not ready yet. But the guy was so persistent that Crawford was unable to escape, blaming everything on his lack of confidence. The heroine stayed and heard a confession that there was an illegitimate child in the Wensbury family. She had no idea that Mary would become known to someone else so quickly. Reynard immediately reported that this child was not his, because he did not want any misunderstandings. The boy was ashamed that his father had allowed such betrayal in his youth. He said that he had conducted a thorough investigation and confirmed his father's intimate relationship. Moreover, the period of the child's birth fell at a time when the Marquise lived in the village. The knight could not find evidence that the girl was born from another man. The guy met Mary in person and realized that she was just as much like her father as he was. Reynard didn't know how to react to the fact that the Marquise was going to accept the girl into their family. The heroine became scared because Valona was already somewhere in the capital, and she did nothing. The elder brother himself was worried that the lady would lack knowledge about high society. Bianca realized with horror that they wanted to hang Mary's education on her, as the best aristocrat. The guy didn't even notice his friend's emotions, because he was busy with his own experiences. And Crawford found it unbearable that this story was slowly leading to its end. Returning home, the heroine thought carefully about what she should do. She was afraid of what might happen if Ricardo and Mary finally met. Bianca had no desire to die, because some girl would take her fiancé's heart. But the lady couldn't kill the innocent miss, so she needed another plan. Besides, there was no guarantee that the murdered Mary would not come back as an evil ghost. But most of all, Crawford was afraid that Ricardo would become angry with her, as was described in the book. Remembering Vinkweiser, Miss guessed that his sad face meant nightmares after the war. She didn't know exactly which of the people the guy had killed came to him every night. The heroine spent most of the night lost in thought, but came to nothing. She was worried that there was less than a week left before the fateful meeting between Ricardo and Mary. The girl tried her best to avoid her death because she deserved to live happily ever after. She wondered what would happen if she managed to prevent these two from meeting. Bianca even jumped up with excitement because she decided that this was her last chance. So the next morning, the girl asked the groom to spend the entire holiday with her. Vinkwiser did not expect that the lady would be so determined to see him during the day. He even blushed at the thought that they could spend the entire evening of the holiday alone. While the knight was thinking, the miss could not sit still from excitement because she was waiting for his decision. What came as a surprise to Crawford was that Ricardo already had plans for that day. But Miss changed her anger to mercy when she heard that the Duke wanted to go for a walk with the children from the orphanage. She breathed a sigh of relief as she thought the guy had already met Mary. Since Miss did not want to leave the kids without a walk, she decided to deviate from her plan. But then Ricardo approached the bride and began to whisper a question to her in a quiet voice. As a result, the heroine agreed to go for a walk with this unusual company. Miss was a little scared by how lively everything was around her. All her life, she spent this day in a quiet and secluded temple, blessing the holiday. That's why the girl always missed the lively festival that took place on the streets. So now she was genuinely scared because of the noise and hubbub, as well as the crowd around. Ricardo patiently explained to the aristocrat that nothing bad had happened at the party. Bianca didn't have time to get used to the chaos, as Lala pulled her along with her. The heroine began to resist the child, since she did not have time to prepare mentally. But the girl quickly realized that the surrounding crowd was not so scary. The people around were noisy, but treated each other with politeness and caution. Only the traders, whose life consisted of advertising their goods, were constantly active. Even children quickly came to their senses and forgot all their grievances as soon as they received something tasty. The heroine looked around in amazement because she liked what she saw. Meanwhile, Lala couldn't concentrate on anything because of her curiosity. She discovered a lovely toy and excitedly pointed it out to her friends. Bianca came to her senses and kindly promised the girl that she would buy her everything she wanted. But the dirt around still scared the girl to the depths of her soul, because she was accustomed to luxury. But the entertainment around, in which the boys participated, genuinely attracted the heroine. She enjoyed watching their happy faces when they managed to win. Bianca never thought that she would ever feel so good as a commoner. So Miss was even surprised that she was happy for the children who caught rats in games. But when she saw the children's happy smiles, the girl was ready to put up with the troubles. After all, what was important to Bianca was not only her happiness, which she realized only now. For a while, Crawford watched the boys, forgetting about all her duties and affairs. Suddenly, for the first time that day, Ricardo spoke to her specifically about the celebration of the festival. The guy admitted that he was glad that Bianca was able to fit into the atmosphere so easily. The heroine blushed a little because the groom praised her for her good behavior. She was confused by the fact that the knight kept showing new facial expressions. But then the miss discovered with fright that a thief had quickly run right past her. This man did not look where exactly he was rushing, as he was trying to carry away the stolen goods. As a result, the man pushed Nicole hard, which he didn't care about at all. Ricardo managed to catch the girl in time, as she almost fell onto the hard floor. Vinkwiser reacted quickly and asked Bianca to watch the children while he ran after the thief. But the heroine couldn't stay put, because she guessed what this would all lead to. She heard a clear female voice a few seconds ago and realized who it belonged to. So the lady left the children with the boy and ran after the knight, trying to stop him. But the heroine understood that she could no longer stop the meeting between Ricardo and Mary. Thanks to long and grueling training, the Duke easily caught the escaped thief. The man immediately began to beg for forgiveness and promised that he would return everything he had stolen. The guy looked around in search of the owner as he wanted to return the property. And then a red-haired girl ran out into the square, loudly cursing at the thief. This was the same Mary Valona, who was born illegitimately to the famous Marquis of Wensbury. The girl was very out of breath from running, and her entire hairdo was disheveled and looked unkempt. But when she saw Ricardo, she froze in delight, because he was too handsome for her. It was only after some time that Mary remembered that she should have thanked him for his help. Vinkwiser showed the bag of money he had taken from the thief, which made the lady even happier. But the guy suddenly demanded proof that the money was hers. Valona was surprised by this turn of events, as she had never encountered mistrust before. Bianca watched this scene from the sidelines and knew all the words from the book by heart. She remembered that Mary's name was embroidered on the bag, as the red-haired miss had said. Crawford felt hurt that she had failed to prevent the two from meeting. The heroine was sure that now Ricardo and Mary would fall madly in love with each other, and all those rare smiles that she had seen before would belong only to Villona. So Bianca felt sick just from that look at the radiant and sweet girl. The aristocrat did not blame the Duke for betrayal, but she could not look at him without tears. And the guy suddenly noticed the emotions that the lady showed on her face, as she forgot herself. At that moment, Miss was choking with the thought that she would not be able to change the ending of her story. Unable to bear everything that was happening, the heroine turned around and ran away. Ricardo called her in panic, because he was scared of such a face, but it was too late. The Duke could not find an answer to why the fair-haired girl was crying at that moment. He thought that today would be a good day, full of discovering new sides of each other. But in the end, for Vinkaiser, everything turned into a new acquaintance and the loss of Crawford from sight. Having collected his thoughts, the guy refused to give his name, as he did not want gratitude in return. He said that Mary could help someone else and thus repay him for his help. These words made Villona blush even more, as she liked this guy even more. And at that moment, Bianca, all in tears, was riding in a carriage to her estate with an empty look. The maid could not help but notice that something was wrong with her mistress, but the lady remained silent. She was not ready to talk even about tomorrow's plans, as she had forgotten about everything else in the world. It turned out that Mary Wensbury herself had come to her, and she could hardly pronounce her new name. But this did not bother the girl at all, who was simple-minded and smiling by nature. Bianca noted to herself that the lady's appearance left much to be desired, despite her efforts. However, Mary still seemed attractive because of her childish and innocent beauty. Villona suddenly admitted that her father and brother asked her to imitate Crawford in everything. The heroine thought sadly that she had really always tried to be perfect in everything. But for some reason, Ricardo liked this young lady in the book much more. Bianca didn't know if she should just step aside and watch others' happiness. She even allowed herself to imagine that right now, Mary's tea was poisoned. In the last minutes of her life, Villona would not have been able to smile brightly and cheerfully, and Crawford would definitely sit there with a stony expression on her face, not intending to help. But all this was just a momentary weakness for the heroine, because she would not have done such a thing. Bianca noticed too late that she was lost in her dreams, and therefore did not continue the conversation. She apologized for this, trying to hide her embarrassment about what happened. Mary tactfully did not ask any more questions, although she was still concerned about the situation. And so the conversation smoothly turned to the fact that Villona's mother was not in good health. But the girl did not despair, and would also like to start helping other people as soon as possible. Bianca couldn't stand it any longer and admitted with a cold look that she wasn't helping others for nothing. But she didn't expect Mary to call her a good person, because many people only think about themselves. The heroine noticed that the girl had such a bright and strong character that she could attract many, but Miss herself could not boast of such a thing because she led a quiet and calm life. As a result, the lady, after talking with Villona, went to Ricardo as she came up with a new plan. In order to save her life, the girl finally decided to break off her engagement to the Duke. But Vinkaiser himself was not at all happy with this opportunity, although in the book he did the same. In fact, while thinking about this act, the heroine recalled many events from her childhood. Then she periodically got into trouble related to the little prince, and each time the girl did not know how to get out of them, but a friend came to her aid. Young Ricardo always fought for justice and tried to protect all the ladies around him. He skillfully turned the conflict onto himself, which is why Azel constantly lost the argument. Bianca did not ask the future Duke for such protection, but she was pleased every time. Since Blunt had little time for games, their quarrels never lasted long. Vinkaiser seemed to the little lady to be a real hero who was not afraid of difficulties, so she looked at him with admiration and adoration, wanting to be together in the future. The little girl did not understand why the child always said that he alone was to blame for her mistakes. But this delicate attitude only pleased Crawford more, so she fell in love. Although the girl said that she was no longer little, this made little impression on the boy. Ricardo felt he had to be responsible for the safety of his guests, so he responded to all of little Bianca's grumbling with a gentle and joyful smile. The heroine was embarrassed and blushed at the sight of such vivid emotions of the child, who tried to behave strictly. She would have liked to watch such moments forever, but time could not be stopped at will. So the lady began to dream of marrying the adult Ricardo, who was the best. Only over time did the girl realize that she had set the wrong goals for herself. She was not a part of the Duke, but a separate person with her own thoughts and feelings. For this reason, the heroine surprised the guy with a request to break off the long-standing engagement between them. Bianca calmly explained that she had made this important decision quite a long time ago and in haste. But now she would like to concentrate not on the wedding, but on her own development. And Miss quickly became angry with the fact that the guy began to interfere with her decision to break up. Crawford believed she was doing the right thing by choosing to take care of herself first. Ricardo sadly asked if the lady had any other good man in mind, but the girl contemptuously declared that she would never have allowed such infidelity. In fact, the heroine expected that Vinkaiser would react less emotionally to her proposal. After all, in the story, it was he who betrayed his fiancée and chose another girl instead, which was terrible. And this man now refused to break off his engagement with Crawford because he was interested in her. The only hope the heroine had was that the story in the book could now change. So Bianca returned to her room as quickly as possible to find out if her suspicions were correct. But Mary still gradually fell in love with Ricardo because he accidentally helped her with the thief. However, this time, the girl's feelings do not find a response in the Duke's heart, which turns out to be already taken. The thing is that the guy had been looking towards a completely different person for quite some time now. And this time, Vinkaiser's first love turned out to be Bianca, who herself did not expect such a turn of events. But the lady was unable to escape her death, because it came from a completely different direction. Crawford could never have imagined that she would die at the hands of Mary, who madly wanted to get the Duke. The girl understood perfectly well that she would not be able to win his love, but she still wanted to stay close. So Valona got rid of her rival without regret, just to achieve her own happiness. The heroine screamed in horror, because she did not want to die at all, but she could not change it. She was afraid that this world would never rest until it finally reached her death for any reason. But the lady was not going to give up so easily, so the next day she met with Mary. The girl came up with a new plan for her salvation and wanted to implement it as soon as possible. Valona was genuinely glad to see the girl she had tried to emulate in many ways. Mary had no idea that Bianca had come to meet her for a reason. The whole point was that the heroine had prepared a very good gift for her friend in advance. The red-haired lady was delighted to see a place in a good hospital for her mother. She looked at her interlocutor in amazement, because she had not been able to achieve such an opportunity. Crawford just smirked in response, as something like that was nothing to her. As a result, Mary could hardly hold back tears of joy from the realization that her mother could be cured. The aristocrat herself pretended that she had not tried too hard to help. But then their conversation was interrupted by the Marquis and Marchioness of Wensbury, who accidentally wandered into the garden. Bianca was not very happy to see them, as her goal was to talk only with Mary. But she responded to the lady's compliments with a smile, so as not to offend her in any way. The lady became alarmed because the Marchioness spoke ill of her illegitimate daughter. She didn't know exactly what kind of relationship they had in their family, but she was thinking about it right now. In part, the heroine understood the feelings of the Marquise, who could not accept her illegitimate daughter. Nothing can justify the Marquis's betrayal, although he tried to make amends. Suddenly, the woman told Bianca that she simply had to talk to her son. The girl laughed politely in response, but did not understand why the Marquise insisted so much. She realized too late that Wensbury's wife had deliberately tried to take her away with her. But Mary understood this almost immediately. But with a sad face, she continued to remain silent about it. So Crawford bravely refused the aristocrat's offer, who bore it with dignity. Bianca stated that she enjoyed talking to Mary, so she would not like to change the purpose of the meeting. The Marchioness finally lost when her husband asked her to return to the estate first. She scornfully wished him a good conversation, trying to hide the fact that she was hurt. The heroine looked at Mary's sad face and thought with alarm about how hard it had been for her. However, right now, Bianca could not help in any way because the Marquis had to do this. Just in case, the girl diligently praised Valona in front of him, which made her blush. Crawford quickly realized that the red-haired lady had a much better relationship with her father, but he was a strict educator, so he hardly praised his daughter for her achievements in education. Mary had a hard time adjusting to the life of an aristocrat after being a commoner. The heroine felt sorry for the girl, whose objections and experiences were not taken into account in this family, but she could very well have tried to make Valona's life easier in order to get closer to her. At the debutante ball, candidates were always helped with their preparations by their noble and skilled mothers. and Bianca was sure that the Marchioness wouldn't even look in Mary's direction before the event. This was partly why Valona was constantly sad, because she didn't know how to prepare herself. So Crawford smiled kindly and offered her help, because she knew a lot. Mary could not even hope for such luck, so she did not calm down for a long time after the meeting. She got carried away by her thoughts and remembered too late that she had an appointment. But Reynard was patient and calm, so he was not at all offended by his sister. However, Mary had nothing to please her brother with, because she had not found a partner for the ball. The eldest son of Wensbury did not scold the younger one because he understood how difficult it was. The saddest thing for the lady was that she would now have to forget all her past friends. Reynard immediately warned that her father would not allow her to communicate with commoners any further. Both of the Marquise's children understood that he was trying to prevent similar mistakes. So the guy said that Miss should only hope for a good and high-status partner. Mary's mind immediately flashed with the majestic image of Ricardo, which she liked. Valona would have liked to see herself only with him, but she knew that was hardly possible. Miss asked other people about this guy and found out that he was of high status, so the girl hoped that she would be able to see him at the ball and dance at least once. Although Mary knew that the knight was not interested in her, she could not stop hoping. So far, there was no one to stop or forbid Valona's sweet mental fantasies. The next morning, Bianca volunteered to help Mary choose a dress for the upcoming ball. And the heroine did it for a reason, since the girl herself had surprisingly bad taste. Crawford was angry about what was happening and waved her fan impatiently, waiting for the next outfit. Reynard went with the girls, but he had no idea about fashion, so he couldn't help. The heroine was not against taking all the initiative upon herself, so she began to loudly command. It was important for the lady to somehow unwind, so as not to think about the stupid plot of the book. She was very worried that Father Ricardo suggested that they start preparing for the wedding as soon as possible. Bianca never received consent to break off the engagement, which is why she was now suffering. And the presence of the modest and polite Reynard at least distracted Miss from her thoughts a little. The guy diligently complimented the lady, which forced her to keep up the conversation. Soon Mary ran into the living room, happy at the sight of her new beautiful outfit. Looking at the girl, the heroine was instantly convinced that she had chosen the perfect dress for her. Bianca set herself the goal of making Valona the perfect debutante, and gradually moved towards it. Crawford understood that the easiest and most understandable thing would be to find a partner for Mary. She smiled sadly because she saw no other way to survive in the end. For some reason, the girl couldn't get the image of where exactly she remained next to Kaiser out of her head. In order not to think about the upcoming ball, the lady hurried to the prince's estate to resolve matters. She walked confidently down the corridor, knowing full well that the heir would not dare refuse her. Bianca was mentally preparing herself for compliments from Azel, who constantly showed sympathy towards her. And the guy, as expected, greeted the girl with words about how much he missed her. First of all, Miss reminded the prince that he had promised to make important documents for her. Only Blunt could quickly move the children from the orphanage to the new building, so he had to be tolerated. The girl tried to figure this matter out on her own, but it was too complicated. Meanwhile, the director and the kids lived in less than ideal conditions all this time. The prince listened to the lady and thoughtfully admitted that he did not recognize the same girl from his childhood. The heroine was not interested in knowing how she looked in the eyes of the ill-mannered guy. Azel suddenly declared that he didn't care about the lady's changes, because he would always like her. From a young age, Miss did not believe in the words of Blunt, who easily complimented many girls. But suddenly the prince became very serious and came close to his surprised friend. He asked Bianca to look at him with a careful gaze if she wanted help. The heroine immediately reminded that the prince could get anything else he wanted, but the guy remembered for the rest of his life the fact that Crawford did not choose him. The girl could not even imagine that the prince was still angry about her choice in childhood. She was surprised to realize that Blunt was much more petty and sarcastic than he appeared. But then Azel only asked that Miss henceforth address him informally by name. Miss was irritated by the guy's attempts to attract her attention, but she needed help. At the moment, only Azel could quickly and easily resolve all the necessary issues. Previously, the heroine never thought about why the heir behaved this way. It turned out that the guy really was ready to do anything just to hear his name from her mouth. He again promised that he would fulfill any of Bianca's wishes as long as she called his name. Crawford was pleased to know that she had such a loyal and reliable friend. She didn't know that at that moment, Ricardo was thinking about becoming close to her. For this reason, the heroine agreed with the groom that he would not accompany her to the ball. Having announced this to Mary, the lady watched her excitement and confusion with interest and silence. The red-haired girl would never have thought that Ricardo would accompany her to the ball. Bianca supported the Marquise's daughter because she wanted to become as close friends with her as possible. The heroine was pleased with the work done because Vinkaiser barely agreed to help. But now Mary was on cloud nine about her upcoming exciting debut. She said a lot of good things to the aristocrat's face, not at all embarrassed by her feelings. Before the girls could finish speaking, they heard someone enter their room. It was Ricardo, who absolutely did not want to be late for such an important event. Both ladies stood frozen in amazement at the sight of such a handsome and strong young man. Bianca felt hurt again that she couldn't be with him while Mary had managed to introduce herself. But Vinkaiser didn't even recognize the girl he had recently helped with a thief at the festival. He remembered this incident only when Valona confessed how she knew him. Watching the couple, the heroine thought that their meeting was like a fairy tale fate. All she could do was step aside and quietly watch the happiness of these two. But Vinkaiser noticed the bride and complimented her on her outfit for the ball. At first, the heroine did not understand that he was addressing her and not Mary, who was trying to please him. The girl was sincerely surprised that Ricardo did not fall in love with Valona at first sight. But the Marquise's daughter calmly supported the Duke's praise, although she herself was at a loss. The guy wanted to add a few more words to Crawford, but did not have time to do so. Bianca thought to herself, with displeasure, that their mutual friend had arrived at a very inopportune time. But the prince did not feel the atmosphere around him at all, as he was too confident in himself. Ricardo instantly became angry when he found out that Crawford was going to the ball with Azel. For the first time in his life, Blunt found himself one step ahead of his friend, which he was incredibly happy about. He had long been anticipating the look on Vinkaiser's face the moment Bianca would be next to him. So the prince continued to smile insolently at the Duke, asserting his rights to the girl. Blunt and Crawford instantly captured the attention of all the aristocrats at the ball. The heroine tried not to communicate with her friend so that no one would think that they were close. But the guy still laughed openly at Ricardo's face, as he had been waiting for this for a long time. Blunt did not regret his prank on the Duke at all, although it was wrong. But the lady was not happy, because now she would have to explain herself to Vinkaiser. But the guy himself didn't see any problem with the fact that there was someone else next to Bianca. She herself gave rise to discussion when she allowed the groom to go with Mary. To console his friend a little, Azel took with him the documents she needed for the shelter. As soon as Crawford came to her senses a little, the guy began to court her again. He said with a charming smile that Bianca was wasting her beauty on the wrong man. These words made the girl blush with embarrassment, since she was not prepared for them. Azel was not going to go back on his words, because he believed that the lady should be with him, so he insistently asked the miss not to refuse him a dance this evening. And the heroine could never refuse the heir, so she obediently went with him. And right at that moment, Ricardo and Mary, whom many had been waiting for, entered the hall. The Marquise's daughter's face clearly showed how nervous she was at that moment. She was afraid of what the aristocrats, who were known for their evil tongues, would say about her. Bianca was worried about Valona no less than she was, because she sympathized with the girl. The heroine knew that Mary would not be able to avoid unpleasant discussions about her origins. Looking at Ricardo, the lady was not even sure whether she herself would be able to behave as if nothing had happened. At this moment, unexpectedly for everyone, Mary stumbled, since she was not used to walking in high heels. However, Vinkaiser had excellent reflexes, so he easily prevented the frightened girl from falling. She looked at the Duke with gratitude, since she could have just embarrassed herself greatly in front of everyone. But Bianca still witnessed the evil laughter that spread cautiously among the aristocrats. Azel took advantage of the situation and hinted to his friend that Mary and Ricardo looked good together. The heroine considered herself stupid because these words somehow hurt her feelings. The guy asked the girl several times to pay attention to him, but she did not listen. But he still didn't lose heart and continued to smile sweetly at the lady, sincerely enjoying her company. In the end, Bianca melted in the arms of the prince, who had been very sweet to her the entire evening. Azel was delighted to be so close to Miss for the first time in a long time. At the end of the dance, he suddenly tilted her into a pirouette and offered to become his princess. Crawford immediately pulled away from her friend and grumbled that such things were not to be trifled with. She couldn't remember Blunt ever feeling nervous around her. And so for a moment, the heroine thought about what her life would be like next to him. Bianca's goal was to find a way to stay alive and stop being afraid that she might be killed. But she had never thought about changing everything around her so radically before. But Asil wanted to see only Crawford as his wife, so he promised to always wait for her. The only thing that bothered the lady at that moment was Ricardo's angry glances in their direction. Bianca felt uncomfortable because the Duke seemed to be accusing her of betrayal with his whole appearance. For this reason, she soon said goodbye to Asil under the pretext that she needed to rest. Before the prince could promise that he would wait for his friend here, he heard his name being called. As a result, Bianca managed to escape from the conversation, which greatly upset the guy. At that moment, Ricardo rudely left Mary alone because he noticed where Crawford had gone. And the heroine left the hall so quickly because she could not stop her wildly beating heart. The whole time she was dancing, she couldn't even look in the direction of Valona and Vinkaiser, who were in the center. The girl was hurt by the fact that she was not the one in the place of the Marquise's daughter. Crawford tried her best to remind herself to be strong and not show emotion, but she didn't expect the Duke to break her much-needed solitude so quickly. The miss asked the guy discontentedly to leave her alone, but it had no effect. This is all because Vinkaiser was angry because he initially did not want to accompany Mary to the ball. He didn't want to distance himself from the lady, but she did everything to break off their engagement. Bianca haughtily stated that everyone around was talking about what a good couple Ricardo and Mary were, but she didn't expect that the guy would connect everything that was happening with Azel, who took advantage of the moment. The lady quickly justified herself by saying that Blunt had forced the conversation on her, as was usually the case. However, Vinkaiser could not so easily forget that his bride was dancing with another. The girl sarcastically remarked that the Duke sounded as if she had actually cheated on him. She couldn't believe that the guy allowed himself to be angry with her, although he himself hadn't paid attention to her for a long time. Ricardo himself really considered Miss guilty, since he had recently confessed his feelings. Although he had not had a ready-made image in his head before, now he saw only Bianca with him. But the Duke clearly lacked the skillful analysis to understand that the girl did not want to be with him. Crawford did not believe in the sincerity of the feelings of the knight who lived only in his dreams. She demanded that the guy swear on his life right then and there that he truly loved her, but she didn't hear the right words in response, which is why she became completely disappointed in him. But the lady didn't have time to leave, because Ricardo suddenly put his arm around her waist. He wanted at all costs to prove to Miss that he really wasn't lying to her about love. But Bianca no longer wanted to hear about how she was the most special girl for the Duke. True, the heroine was at a loss under the pressure of Vinkaiser, who spoke heatedly to her. Miss saw how great his desire to be near was, but she only became more frightened. The heroine knew that if she had feelings for the Duke, she would have stayed with him, but the girl was ready to sacrifice her emotions and give the knight to another. All because Bianca wanted to live much more than to feel true happiness for a moment. She didn't want to face the prospect of a boyfriend leaving her one day because he was disappointed in their relationship, so the lady hurried back to the main hall without her partner, ending the conversation there. The first thing she did was look for Mary, who now looked sad and lost. The heroine immediately guessed that the girl was being bullied by other aristocrats because of loneliness. At the sight of Bianca approaching them, the girls immediately became cute and fluffy. But Crawford wasn't buying the fake smiles they flashed around everyone. She immediately began asking questions about the commotion that had taken place shortly before her arrival. But the main instigator of the bullying had no intention of confessing her sins, so she began to accuse Mary of being too stupid and naive a girl. The girl even masterfully pretended to sympathize with Bianca, whose partner was taken away. Valona listened to all these offensive words in silence, since she did not know how to defend herself. The heroine remembered that this lady named Kate Conwells knew how to skillfully spread rumors. And before, she had not touched this gossip, since there was no strong need for it. But Kate angered Crawford and realized too late that she had made a mistake. Bianca calmly explained that she herself had asked Ricardo to accompany Mary to the ball. This dispute immediately attracted the attention of everyone around, as people noticed the impending conflict. But the heroine was not worried about this fact, as she was confident that she could defend herself. And Conwells really had nothing to say in response to the smart and beautiful aristocrat. No one could accuse the Duke of treason or betrayal, because he would have to answer for his words. So the blonde lady quickly made Kate run away from the main hall. Gossip Girl took all her friends and apologized to Bianca several times for what happened. But that wasn't the end of it for Crawford, because she still had to talk to Mary. She tried to hide the fact that she was engaged, but now Valona knew about it. Miss was unhappy that her whole plan regarding Mary had fallen apart so quickly. She didn't even think of an escape route for herself, so she was confused and embarrassed. Suddenly, the red-haired lady spoke first, so that Bianca did not have time to justify herself. The Marquise's daughter loudly shouted out congratulations on the engagement, as this was joyful news for her. The girl tried to observe all the rules of etiquette, which had been difficult for her until now. Crawford had mixed emotions, not expecting such warm support. She only said that she wanted to fulfill Mary's wish, so she didn't say anything. Valona didn't think about being offended at all, because she had always been a kind and good person. Mary sincerely thanked her friend for the opportunity to debut. The heroine could not even imagine that this whole situation would be resolved so simply and quickly. But the Marquise's daughter herself admitted that the fair-haired lady was much more suitable for Kaiser. Bianca remembered from the book how passionately Mary loved him, so she was sad. The girl truly considered the Duke to be the best man in this empire, but she wasn't going to resist the connection between Ricardo and Bianca because of her feelings. Crawford knew Valona was kind, but she didn't think she would forgive her for all the cover-ups. Here their conversation was interrupted by the Duke, who approached the girls with a gloomy expression on his face. The heroine awkwardly thanked him for his help, but she had nothing else to say. The guy immediately noticed this, which made him even gloomier, and silently walked away from further conversation. Bianca herself did not perceive the knight's behavior as a misunderstanding between them, so she didn't stop him, also because Renard was now approaching the girls. It turned out that the knight had been looking for his friends for a long time, but could not see them in the hall. He was worried about his sister because he heard that evil gossip was being spread around her. Then Bianca remembered that she needed to finish this evening, as it was already late. But before leaving, the lady heard Mary's call, so she looked nervously at the red-haired girl. Only Valona once again thanked her friend for everything that happened to her today. Because of this, the lady finally realized that she could never hate the Marquise's daughter. It just turned out that at the end of the book, it was now Mary who painfully killed her friend. The heroine was horrified that she had died again due to some stupid coincidence. The girl could not even imagine that this time she would be accused of murdering Valona's mother. History changed once again, but it didn't make things any better for Crawford herself. But the lady was completely sure that she would never kill others. She guessed that someone had killed Mary's mother and blamed her for everything, for some unknown reason. Miss knew that Valona was incredibly naive and therefore believed everything that was told to her. Even Bianca herself took advantage of this trait of the girl to win her trust. And now Miss had to behave again in such a way as not to give Mary any reason to doubt her. So literally, the next morning, she headed to the hospital where Valona's mother lived. The Marquise's daughter quickly found a friend herself, as she was glad to see her. She was happy to introduce Madame Maggie to the aristocrat to make a good impression. Crawford made sure to appear friendly and not arouse any suspicion. She didn't even need to introduce herself, as Valona explained everything to her mother on her own. This made Miss a little confused, but she did not notice the hostile mood on the woman's face. The heroine was pleased to hear that her daughter constantly told her mother about her. The girl calmed down after these words and was able to smile sincerely in response to her interlocutor. She had come up with a good cover story in advance, under which she sponsored a local market. Therefore, no one could suspect her of wanting to get to know Maggie better. For the sake of appearances, Crawford actually spent some time watching the people walking around the market. And now Bianca was calmly accepting all the compliments that Valona showered on her. Eventually, Mary invited the aristocrat to walk with them for a while. This was precisely the heroine's real plan, who was afraid to find out about Maggie's accidental death. The girl pretended that she did not expect such an invitation, while she herself could not wait for it. At that moment, Bianca's parents were in audience with Empress Mayam. The man and woman did not expect that the ruler would insist on an alliance with the prince. It turned out that the Empress still hoped that her son would have a wife in the form of Bianca, and the fact that Ricardo accompanied another lady to the ball gave her reason to hope. The girl had long been attractive to the ruler as a future heir to the throne, but Crawford's parents were quick to announce that their daughter's engagement had not been broken off. However, Mayam insisted on her offer, as no one could refuse her. She only asked that Bianca personally speak with Azel, who was waiting for her. The woman was convinced that her son would be the best partner for an aristocrat. The ruler believed that there was nothing in the world better than the honorable place of a princess. But Bianca herself didn't even intend to look in Blunt's direction because she was too busy. She communicated with Mary with interest, telling her in detail about absolutely everything. The lady became wary when she learned that Maggie sometimes went out on the street completely alone. Even Valona didn't know this detail about her mother, although she didn't always have time to walk with her. The woman said that she periodically visits a church located nearby. The Marquise's daughter hoped that her mother would soon feel much better in this place. Crawford ended up getting so caught up in the conversation that she forgot about the rest of her business. So the hospital director had to spend time finding her himself. He had long wanted to talk to his benefactress, whose money was used to support all the treatment. The heroine did not want to leave Mary and Maggie without her attention, since she came only for their sake. But the girl saw that these two felt great alone, because they were a family. Never before had Bianca received such attention, and it made her heart ache. She ran away as quickly as possible, trying to remember what the book had written about Maggie. But this woman in the plot was just a minor character without a description of her life. This circumstance angered the heroine, because it was impossible to treat people like that. She donated a large sum of money to the principal so that he could take care of the elder Valona. In this way, the lady hoped not to give Mary any reason to hate her or commit cruel murder. More than anything in the world, Bianca didn't want anyone around her to die so stupidly. But Maggie herself had no idea that her life depended on some kind of plot. The woman tried to follow all the doctor's orders so that she would feel better as soon as possible. But in fact, she was not as simple and kind as she seemed at first glance. Meanwhile, Bianca was creating a good image for herself by treating her parents to delicious food. Everyone knew how rare and best these confectionery treats were. The mother and father were pleased with their daughter's behavior, which surprised them every day. The girl herself smiled kindly and accepted the compliments addressed to her with dignity. Recently, because of the book, the heroine could not relax at all, as she was very afraid. All her thoughts were occupied only by this plot, which is why she didn't even look at other literature. And even now, the lady accidentally drifted away in her thoughts, which is why she missed her mother's entire speech. The girl swallowed in fear, since she had no right to show that there was something wrong with her. But eventually, her mother began to ask anxiously if everything had been okay with Bianca lately. The heroine did not expect that her parents would suddenly start talking about the imperial family again. As a result, she had to personally visit her old friend, who was waiting for her. The guy immediately began to show concern for her, which only made Bianca sigh heavily. But in fact, Azel knew in advance that Crawford came to him with another refusal. The lady immediately admitted that she could not ignore the order to talk from Mayam herself. Blunt laughed it off. As talk of their possible wedding had long since died down, Miss asked for forgiveness for her behavior in childhood, because she often offended the prince. One time, the girl even shouted to the whole neighborhood that she never intended to marry him, but a lot of time had passed since that moment, so Azel didn't even think of being offended. The guy warmly recalled their conversations together, which were now becoming less and less frequent. The girl could not help but notice the prince's mood, and she regretted that she did not love him. But it came as a surprise to the heroine that Blunt would suddenly talk about her quarrel with Villainess. The prince reminded her with a smile that otherwise the lady would not have allowed herself to have a hot dance with him. Only the heroine herself confidently stated that her relationship with Villainess was as before. Blunt couldn't help but speak out on this matter, as he didn't consider this a good sign. The lady herself understood this, but she tried in every way to protect herself and the young duke. The truth was that since the engagement, the relationship between Ricardo and Bianca had not become warmer, and this gave Azel hope that the girl would one day choose him. Crawford suspected the prince's sympathy, but had not previously considered him as a partner. However, the guy was not upset about this, because he did not want to force his girlfriend to do anything. The heroine watched with embarrassment as the heir, for some reason, came closer and closer to her. She let out a surprised cry when the boy asked her to knight him at the ceremony. In response, Blunt confidently stated that he wanted rumors to start about them after this event. He knew that such an honor was given only to members of the imperial family, and he did not mind. For the first time in her life, Bianca received direct proof that Azel loved her. The girl thought about how the plot of the book would change if she accepted such an offer. More than anything in the world, Miss would like to avoid her death by any means necessary. So the lady grumbled that Villainess would not let her go so easily, since he had already refused to break up. But Azel was already glad that Bianca did not refuse him right away. He admitted that he and his mother already had a plan on how to take Crawford. Among other things, for this reason, the guy asked the girl to knight him at the upcoming ceremony. In the future, Azel planned to gradually lead Crawford to marriage with him. The heroine was pleased to hear that the prince was ready to wait for her as long as it took. And Blunt was happy that Bianca did not resist the implementation of his plan. But in reality, the girl at that moment was thinking only about Duke Vinkaiser. The next morning, the heroine chose which event she would go to this time. But she was angered by the fact that almost all the aristocrats invited her only together with Ricardo. So, quite quickly, the lady got tired of reading numerous letters from noble persons. She understood that it was logical to invite more than just one bride to the event. But Vinkaiser hasn't communicated with Bianca since the situation at Mary's debut. The girl had no idea what thoughts were going through the angry guy's head. Miss even suggested that he might soon write to her about breaking off the engagement. However, for some reason, the heroine felt sad at the thought of freeing herself from Ricardo. In the end, the lady found only one invitation that called only her, and it was from Conwell's. Since Bianca didn't want to make an enemy in Kate, she agreed to come. Having finished with the letters, the girl felt terribly tired, although she was just sitting in one place. But she didn't relax and asked Panya to help her get ready for the trip to the shelter. Crawford was also concerned that the events in the book had not yet changed for her. The girl suggested that this was due to the fact that she had not yet made a final decision. So, Bianca has set herself the goal of doing something new in the near future. And the lady began by giving Leanna the documents for moving into the new building. The head mistress of the orphanage was completely shocked by such a gift, which she considered very expensive. But the heroine was sure that this woman could be trusted, because she did not think about money. Although the lady had long since begun to support her financially, the headmistress gave everything to the children. This put her in a good light for Crawford, so she continued to try to help. What pleased the girl most was that the children liked the hired teacher. They all approached learning with joy and enthusiasm, diligently remembering everything. The heroine was pleased with this progress because she was worried about the children's future. But the headmistress forgot to warn the lady that she had an appointment with another person. As a result, Ricardo unexpectedly entered the room, which noticeably embarrassed the young aristocrat. The guy himself froze in the passageway, since he didn't plan to make peace anytime soon. But the girl took matters into her own hands and asked him to give her some time to talk. She honestly admitted that she would knight the boys, which upset the Duke. So Miss had to defend herself once again at the sight of Vinkaiser's angry face. The guy continued to accuse Aesel of being the reason for wanting to break off the engagement. But he hadn't been listening to the gossip of the aristocrats lately, so he was surprised by the news. Bianca told the Duke that they were no longer considered a strong couple in high society. But Vinkaiser himself responded to such stupid rumors from people with a sarcastic laugh. But the couple didn't have time to finish speaking, as Lala suddenly burst into the room. Crawford hesitantly praised the girl, who ran up to show off her accomplishments. Vinkaiser was surprised to see the little girl holding a piece of paper and a pen in her hands. He personally wanted to see her writing skills, so he asked not to take the girl away. The heroine watched the Duke's actions with incomprehension, as she sensed a catch. And indeed, Ricardo took advantage of the situation and sat as close to her as possible. The girl didn't even have time to react in any way to prevent such impudence. She only hissed angrily at the Duke, who did not feel the least bit guilty. And at that moment, Lala sweetly and innocently demonstrated what she had managed to learn from her nanny. Bianca answered the little girl with confusion, as she was very nervous about being close to the guy. Here she realized that she had never told the girl her name, but she wanted to write it down. Lala was not immediately able to repeat her friend's beautiful and complex phrase, so the girl even sobbed in disappointment that she couldn't cope with this task now. But Ricardo supported the little girl and promised that he would definitely give her something. The heroine was still embarrassedly trying to move away from the Duke, who sat so close to her. She was afraid to see another evil emotion on the handsome face of her possible husband. But surprisingly, the guy took pity and only asked the girl to go to the ball with him. Before Crawford could take her hand away, the Duke kissed it, indicating his rights. Many years ago, due to constant victories during wars, the Splendor Empire achieved great power. But the price during the last battle 5 years ago was the loss of many civilian lives. Therefore, the Emperor ordered that this Victory Day be celebrated with a large-scale holiday from then on. He personally rewarded loyal subjects who helped him conquer and pacify neighboring empires. And the common people were happy to have the opportunity to visit the festival once again, even if it was because of such an event. But Mary had never heard of Victory Day being prepared for with such care. Bianca was not surprised by this, because Valona was born in a quiet village far from the capital of the empire. But the Marquis's daughter was not sure that she wanted to take part in the festival now, although she was forced to. The girl panicked just from the thought that she would have to meet the rulers in person. However, Crawford delighted her friend by saying that she was just about to prepare her for the conversation. The heroine had no doubt that she would cope with the task perfectly. And to begin with, she and Valona went to various expensive shops in the capital. But the red-haired girl herself had no understanding of fashion at all, so she was constantly choosing everything in a row. Crawford carefully selected dresses for the Marquise's daughter, as she wanted everyone to like her. Bianca even thought about styling Mary's hair, which was always disheveled, a little differently. The heroine was genuinely concerned that the Marquise's daughter could look plain even in a beautiful outfit, so she set herself the goal of creating a stunning image for a naive girl. The Marquise's daughter did not hinder the fair-haired lady in any way, as she respected her experience and knowledge. For herself, Bianca chose dresses in just a few minutes, because she knew what would suit her, so it was easy for her to focus on helping Mary alone, who was confused by what was happening. During the process, the heroine accidentally mentioned that she would definitely attend the Conwell's tea party. Valona immediately remembered that unpleasant lady who had bullied her during her recent debut. Bianca only now realized that the girl greatly lacked experience in communicating in high society. She tried to explain that the aristocrats defended their positions, but no one started an active feud. For Valona, such communication was creepy and incomprehensible, because she had never pretended to be someone else. Crawford mentioned about Kate that she became popular because she was skillful at spreading rumors among people. The Marquise's daughter was pleasantly embarrassed when she realized that her rank was higher than that evil girl's. In the end, the heroine advised Mary to try to maintain good relations with all the aristocrats. In response, Valona, with poorly suppressed irritation, admitted that she wanted to rip out the evil lady's hair. But Bianca couldn't allow something like that to happen, because it would lower Mary's status. That evening, as soon as Valona returned to the room, she immediately fell exhausted onto the very soft bed. The girl still felt uncomfortable about having to sleep alone in such a large room. She noticed a small envelope with sweets on the table and immediately plunged into memories. The lady did not expect that during the day, Crawford would suddenly invite her to the best bakery in the empire with him. She watched with great pleasure every elegant step of the beautiful Bianca. But what surprised Mary most was that her friend ordered delicious cookies for her too. Valona increasingly believed that Crawford was a good person after her kind deeds. In fact, this is exactly what the heroine was trying to achieve, but she herself felt warmth in the process. Mary was warned in advance that living among high society was very difficult, but the girl tried her best to be like Bianca, who outshone everyone for her. But the lady's mentor could not call any of the Crawford family kind and generous people. She knew perfectly well that these people always acted only out of personal motives and interests. However, Valona still continued to believe that her friend was different from other aristocrats. She was so sure of this because she remembered how people who are not sincere behave. But now, for the first time in her life, Miss had a good friend, and she was going to protect him to the last. The next morning, the heroine went to the Conwell's tea party where she had been invited in advance, but she wasn't interested in listening to gossip from the girls around her, so she drank tea and thought about her own things. Meanwhile, Conwells began to scold the impudent Mary again for accepting her into such a good family. As a result, due to her carelessness, Bianca confirmed all of the cunning Kate's words. At the very beginning of this meeting, Conwells was not sure how to behave with such an important guest, but Crawford began to delicately show her best side from the very beginning. She accepted numerous compliments with dignity, although she did not need them. In the meantime, the lady said something nice to the other girls, which embarrassed them. To make amends for all past misunderstandings, with the help of Panny, Miss brought a gift with her. The heroine knew that the most delicious cookies in the empire would definitely please everyone. And Kate and her charges really quickly began to communicate more politely with the ladies. As a result, Crawford even got confused about who exactly was in charge at this small tea party. In between, Conwells was adept at praising the surroundings of her home to attract attention, but Bianca began to tire of such noticeable fawning even before she reached the table. She knew perfectly well what these girls would chat about for hours. Kate's friends were never known for their original gossip, so Crawford didn't listen to them. The lady attended the event only to smooth over her relations after the ball. Although in reality, the girls reminded her of similarly dressed and stupid mannequins. The only lady who really caught Bianca's attention sat very quietly. She guessed that the girl was happy to just be present in this place, so she remained silent. Meanwhile, Crawford was completely bored in the company of people who were discussing everyone around her. Bianca thought absently about what Lala might look like in pretty dresses. The girl was sure that the girl would win the hearts of many, because she was beautiful both in body and soul. And right now, the little girl was demonstrating her ambition and diligence in learning. The heroine was so deep in thought that she didn't notice how she was addressed during the conversation. She found that all the girls were waiting with interest for her answer to their important question. So Crawford delicately played along with these ladies, which made them truly delighted. Bianca didn't ask about the subject of the conversation, as she felt awkward. As soon as the girl had the opportunity, she immediately ran away to the children's shelter. And the aristocrat found them right in the middle of a fun game, which was expected for her. But the lady was surprised to see Mary, who was happily playing with the kids. The heroine could not even imagine that Valona would ever personally visit this place. But what struck Crawford most was Ricardo's cheerful laughter, which she had not seen for several days. The first to notice Bianca was little Lala, who was distinguished by her good attentiveness to everything. She immediately dropped the game and ran towards the girl she considered a real princess. The lady tried to come to her senses and greeted the girl, who rushed towards her with a smile. The miss was embarrassed by the fact that the Duke also paid attention to her, because she did not want to communicate with him. Meanwhile, Mary said that she had become interested in the orphanage, in whose honor the ball was being organized. But the girls didn't have time to talk, because Lala demanded that Bianca play with them. The heroine refused this opportunity under the pretext that she had a lot of things to do. No one tried to stop her, since the aristocrat mentioned that she had brought gifts. Crawford smiled tenderly at Lala and boasted that she had brought the best cookies in the empire. At that moment, she was glad that Mary had taken full custody of the children. However, Bianca could not avoid talking to Ricardo as he headed straight towards her. The girl asked in confusion if the Duke was not usually busy with business at this time. But instead of answering, the guy reminded her that she hadn't said anything about his recent proposal. Last time, their conversation was interrupted by an inspired Lala, for whom they were a couple from a fairy tale. And now the lady admitted with a sigh that she could not promise her fiancé anything concrete. The heroine believed that she had no right to refuse the prince's requests, no matter how much the Duke liked it. Ricardo suddenly raised his voice out of anger and displeasure, but he couldn't stop at that moment. Suddenly, the bride and groom heard Lala's loud cry, which forbade them to quarrel. The girl crossed the adults' hands and forced them to immediately make peace with each other. But it didn't end there, because the little girl also demanded that they hug. The heroine didn't have time to refuse when she felt the warmth of Ricardo's body, which made her very embarrassed. The girl visibly blushed because the guy began to confess his feelings to her again. He promised that he would try to be the best for her so that the girl would not think about others. And that night, a girl, about whom nothing was known in the book yet, was creeping through the streets. But quite quickly, she encountered a man who blocked her further path. But it turned out that they had been in love with each other for a long time and ran away to meet. The beloved happily boasted that he would soon become a real knight. The girl was glad that everything went exactly according to their plan, but the events of the book did not reflect this. And this morning, Mary again visited her mother, whom she had missed a lot lately. Bianca was present, still trying to gain the trust of this family. They talked about the upcoming ceremony, where Valona was afraid of being embarrassed by awkwardness. Maggie was a little concerned about her daughter's skills, but tried to support her. Only now did Crawford learn that as a token of gratitude, Mary's mother had knitted a scarf for her. The woman, with a smile on her face, explained that she could not help but repay the aristocrat in some way. The heroine was pleased to hear this, because she did not expect any payment. The lady was very confused and admitted that she had never received a handmade gift before. In response, Maggie proudly reported that she was quite good at knitting things. Even in the village, some noble people bought hand-knitted items from her. And in Mary's childhood, her mother knitted most of the things the girl wore. Suddenly, they started talking about Valona's hat, which she loved to wear at all times. Maggie was concerned that the baby was taking this thing with her from home, even in the spring. This circumstance made the heroine laugh a lot, as she had never heard such stories about herself. Here, the woman remembered that she had something else to tell about her naughty daughter's childhood. She said that there are legends according to which there have always been many fairies in the forest. And Maggie said that she convinced her daughter that she had given one of the fairies a bear hat. This was necessary so that the girl would always come home under the supervision of a fairy. It was only one night, according to the mother's story, that a fairy flew in and took the baby's hat. As an adult, Mary was very embarrassed by this story because she was naive. Valona hoped that Bianca wouldn't treat her worse because of her behavior as a child. But then the heroine seriously stated that the fairy should not have stolen the hat from the little girl. Then Maggie explained with a smile that instead of the fairy, she had actually taken her daughter's hat. Crawford realized she had fallen for a fake story, which made her feel ashamed, but none of the women were going to laugh at the aristocrat for her excessive gullibility. So the lady was able to rejoice in the fact that they were all having a good time under the cover of her guard. It was the first time she had seen such strong and warm bonds between family members. The girl hoped that her daughter and mother would not quarrel, but she herself returned because of business at the estate. And at home, a surprise awaited her in the form of a huge number of gifts in the center of the living room. Under this pile lay only one note, sent on behalf of the crown prince. He said that he decided to give the girl a beautiful dress that only she deserves. The lady felt awkward when Blunt wrote that she would look beautiful in any outfit. The girl noticed almost immediately that much of what was given could not be found even in the Empire. But most of all, Miss was impressed by the decoration that was timidly waiting for its moment in the box. So Miss ordered to replace the dress that was originally prepared for the ceremony. While getting ready for bed, the heroine took out another box that she had previously hidden. The thing is that not long ago, she received a beautiful decoration from Vinkaiser. The guy, with embarrassment on his face, admitted that he decided to give the girl such a gift. The lady guessed that this brooch was made to order, although the Duke pretended that it was inexpensive. Such brooches have always decorated the dresses of noble ladies to make the outfit more sophisticated. Only Miss knew which piece of jewelry she would ultimately choose for the upcoming event. The heroine sincerely considered such a competition between guys for her heart and hand to be stupid, but she had no right not to prepare properly for the upcoming holiday, where she had the main role. The heroine was flattered that she would be able to personally knight worthy guys. The only thing that bothered Miss was the need to attend the evening ball. She would much rather attend the festival with the common people on the city streets. However, the lady had to meet Mary beforehand to prepare for the ball. She put on the dress that the prince gave her because she considered it the most suitable. Valona was glad that her congratulations to the rulers had been successful, and she had worried in vain. The heroine smiled at this, although she had to meet with friends soon. Estelle immediately noticed that the girl was wearing everything that he had recently given her, but in reality, Crawford didn't attach as much importance to it as the guy himself did. But he deliberately began to boast about his good choice, which greatly angered Ricardo. The guy himself admitted that the lady looked amazing, but he still felt offended. The heroine could only hope that her two friends would not quarrel on the evening of the ball. The Duke wanted to somehow take revenge on the prince for the fact that the miss chose his outfit. So, as a groom, he kissed the girl's hand, making Blunt envy him. Mary had to stand silently aside, since she had no interest in any of the guys. But then Reynard opened the doors and reminded them that the ceremony was about to begin. For the first time in her life, the heroine was so happy to see a guy that he interrupted her friends' arguments. Bianca carried out her role beautifully and gracefully throughout the event. The girl was grateful to the prince for giving her such an amazing opportunity. The boys all repeated the oath word for word, receiving the title of knight for this. At the end of the ceremony, Azel helped Crawford finish everything correctly. But the lady had already heard rumors spreading through the crowd that she had taken Mayam's place, so everyone who was among the aristocrats at that moment was forced to listen. And most of all, Ricardo was angry about the gossip, because he had no intention of breaking off his engagement with the lady. But even his friend couldn't help at that moment, because nothing depended on him. That evening at the orphanage, business went on as usual among the obedient children. Nicole, as the eldest girl, decided to give Lale a small but very sweet gift. The little girl was delighted that her wallet now looked like a little kitten. The girls didn't often please each other with such little things, but they tried to help in everything. Nicole kept an eye on many of the kids at the shelter, encouraging them to follow the rules. But she was not always able to remain an authority figure for the energetic boys at the orphanage. But they were easily attracted to sweet Lala with her spontaneity and kindness. The boys saw that the girl was the favorite of many, but they only joked about it a little. Recently, thanks to Bianca's influence, all the children have had their own pocket money. The boys were incredibly grateful to the aristocrat who provided them with many opportunities. The older ones always saved this cash, while the younger ones spent it on sweets. Many boys in the future were going to become knights, like Ricardo himself. But personally, Lala, due to her age, has not yet even thought about the distant future. She dreamed of catching at least one glimpse of the prince, to look at his beauty. All the children heard that many adults were now participating in the festival and ball. They would have liked to see these events, but they were still too young for that. But none of them realized that Bianca was not at all happy about this event. No matter how hard the lady tried to avoid it, she again found herself between two guys. Acel tried, as a prince, to take away the first dance of the desired miss from his rival, while Ricardo was confident that he had a better chance as the groom. As a result, the heroine had to watch yet another quarrel over her identity. None of the childhood friends were going to give up the beautiful girl to another at that moment. The lady only looked from Acel to Ricardo in confusion, not knowing how to stop them. She noticed that Vinkaiser was gradually beginning to give in to Blunt in conversation for the first time. Bianca did not expect the prince to mention her feelings that she had been harboring for the Duke for 10 years. It came as a surprise to the lady that the heir knew about the talk of breaking off the engagement. The guy was partly proud of the fact that he could get almost any information due to his status. So right now, he was going to fight for true happiness for his beloved. This turn of events came as a surprise to Ricardo, who had done little for Bianca. For the first time in a long time, the prince was seriously determined to fight for the Mrs. Hart again. Crawford had never heard before that he had once silently surrendered for the sake of a friend. Even as a child, the boy often announced to Vinkaiser that he would definitely propose to Bianca. At that moment, Ricardo didn't care, because he didn't have any feelings for the girl. That's why Azel beamed happily, believing that he had no competitors around. He had only one Lady Crawford in mind for his future wife. But so far, he hasn't been able to make proper friends with the wayward little girl. However, Blunt did not see any obstacles for himself because he was the heir to the throne. In response, Vinkaiser wisely advised his friend to first ask Bianca's own opinion, all because the boy did not even consider the possibility that the lady could refuse him. Crawford dreamed of becoming a real lady, and only he could help her achieve wealth. Only after some time, when the girl chose not him, the guy realized how wrong he was. He could give the whole world to the girl he had sincerely loved since childhood. But Azel couldn't do anything about the fact that Bianca had fallen in love with someone other than him. And each time the boy watched with sadness as the girl smiled at someone other than him. So Blunt wasn't surprised when Crawford linked her family to Winkiser. Since his friend accepted his girlfriend's proposal, the prince believed that there were feelings between them. However, as time passed, nothing at all changed between Bianca and Ricardo. And the heir did not believe his friend's words that he actually loved the fair-haired aristocrat. He believed that he had every right to lay claim to the girl's heart, which was free. It came as a shock to Vinkaiser that he had not asked the lady's opinion all this time. But at the very peak of the argument, the heroine could not stand it and asked Azel to stop his attack. The girl felt awkward that her friends were arguing over such a stupid reason. With a heavy heart, Blunt said that today was his last chance for Ricardo. This conversation brought back memories of events that had taken place about 10 years ago. At that time, he was too busy with business, and the girl often waited for him until the last minute. Seeing Bianca tired, Ricardo began to worry about her condition. But the lady was so happy at the opportunity to see her beloved that she did not pay attention to herself. So the boy had no choice but to play along with the girl's fantasies. This time, however, Crawford came to find out her friend's opinion about their imminent engagement. In fact, Vinkaiser was not ready for something like this, since he did not have feelings for Miss. But it hurt him to see her upset face, so he couldn't refuse. The boy honestly admitted that he would try to reciprocate Bianca's feelings in the future. And after these words, the heroine became so emotional that she burst into tears right in the corridor. She was ready to do anything for her beloved, so she promised to become the best duchess. But after so many years, the promise has lost all meaning due to the unchanged relationship. And Ricardo felt very ashamed of how insensitively he had behaved towards the girl all this time. And Bianca was worried that Azel had decided to break off her engagement for his own sake. As a result, Mrs. Mood was so spoiled that she did not want to go to the ball. But then Vinkaiser spoke directly about feelings, but the girl could not confess her love to him. Lately, she has seen many new sides of the guy she had never interacted with before. Crawford noted with surprise that the Duke, for some reason, became much warmer and more caring towards her. And right now, she again couldn't understand what Ricardo was feeling with such a sad face. The guy suddenly admitted that all this time he had been behaving incorrectly and neglecting his bride. He never tried to understand the aristocrat, whom he assumed to be arrogant by default. But Bianca had grown tired of the constant apologies that Vinkaiser had been making lately. She watched the changes in the Duke's face with surprise, not knowing what they meant. Ricardo analyzed everything that was happening between them and realized that he could not live without the girl. It hurt him just to think that she might leave him for someone else. He would like to make sure that the lady always smiles and does not walk around upset for some reason. Vinkaiser understood that he had no right to do this, but still asked to be given one last chance. The heroine was so confused by the guy's touching speech that she froze in place. She would have given a lot to hear his sensual confessions a few years earlier. The next day the celebration continued, and the Marquis announced the beginning of the nightly competitions. Bianca was nervous because she had never witnessed such an event before. But what bothered her most was the closeness of Ricardo, who was going to sit next to her. The lady was troubled by thoughts about the conversation that had taken place between them just yesterday. She asked the guy to wait for a while because she was not ready to give an answer. So the girl nervously shuddered every time he addressed her by name. The heroine was saved only by the presence of Mary, who asked many questions with curiosity. The Marquise's daughter wanted to know why Vinkaiser never took part in competitions. It turned out that the guy once tried to do this, but defeated his opponents in a few minutes. Therefore, from then on, the Duke avoided sword fights with other knights at all costs. The Marquise personally was amused by this situation, because he remembered his hot temper during his youth. Crawford felt a little better because she wasn't alone with her fiancé. They were soon joined by a noblewoman named Lauren, who loved competition. She didn't expect that Bianca would also decide to watch the knights' competitions this year, but the girl only made things worse when she mentioned the relationship between the couple. Even Mary noticed that her new interlocutor was distinguished by her sarcasm and malice, but her father skillfully prevented any quarrels around, as he had a lot of experience. The man briefly told his daughter what the essence of today's night competition was. He himself would not be averse to demonstrating his power and skills, if not for his age. But the Marquis was proud of his son, who went straight into the very center of the battle. These competitions were not so easy to complete, because it was necessary to achieve the defeat of the opponent. And very few could afford to admit defeat during battle, which was considered a disgrace. However, Reynard bravely went into the arena, despite all the difficulties of this test. Just as he stepped onto the stage, he looked towards his sister and Lady Bianca, who were chatting with each other. But what impressed the guy most was Crawford's incredible beauty, which always shone. The sight of the girl gave the guy even more motivation to win the battles. Even Ricardo noticed that this time the Marquise's son behaved somewhat differently than usual. Bianca was surprised that the battles ended too quickly because of Reynard. The guy showed everyone his brilliant skills, ferociously attacking his opponents. As a result, Vinkaiser could not stand it and jumped up, which surprised the fair-haired lady. But at that moment, Mary turned to her friend again, so she did not have time to stop the groom. Valona was interested in the fact that for some reason, there were many women at the nightly competitions. And Lauren quickly explained that this was because the winner was rewarding his lady. None of them could understand why Ricardo suddenly demanded that the fighting be stopped. Meanwhile, the Duke was angrily sorting things out with Reynard, who had gone berserk in the battles. But the Marquise's son clearly sought such attention to his person, since he was not confused. He threw the Duke a sash and demanded that they fight in a joust. Aesel could have stopped everything that was happening, but he became interested in finding out how it would all end. So the girls in the stands were able to see how the Duke and the Marquise's son would fight. The heroine realized too late that the guys would now fight for a bouquet for her. Before the start, Vinkaiser gallantly allowed Reynard to deviate from the intended plan. But the guy confidently stated that now he was more confident in his decisions than ever before. He honestly admitted that he would like to give a bouquet to Lady Crawford once in his life. But Ricardo could not allow his friend such impudence towards his bride.